Namaste, I am Rukmini Banerji. I'm going to talk to you about teaching at the right level, a method that we have used quite effectively to help systems tackle challenges and deliver results. Let's first understand the problem that we are talking about. In India, before we start working with children, we sit with them, and ask them together to do a few simple reading tasks. So, if I have a child who is in grade 3 or 4 or 5, I will sit with them, show them a bunch of these different tasks, reading letters, reading words, reading a small paragraph, which is usually at kind of a grade 1 level in Indian textbooks, and then a story, which is at a second grade level. We do this with children who are at least 8 and older, because the teaching at the right level works best when you've actually been in school for a bit, and you are at least a couple of years into the primary school system, so you have exposure to having been in school, or even if you're out of school, you're a little bit older and cognitively ready to take on what we are going to do. So I sit with the child, I figure out what the child can read comfortably, and then I mark the child as a particular level after hearing them speak, hearing them read, and figuring out where their comfort level lies. This, incidentally, is the basis of the annual Status of Education report, otherwise known as ASER, which is widely used in India, and versions of that are used in many other countries. So if we look at where India is on reading levels based on the kind of assessment I just described, then this is the data here is from ASER 2018. And you can see that we've placed children in 5 different levels. Those who are not yet able to read letters, those who can read letters but not words, those who can read words but are struggling with sentences, those who can read sentences or a paragraph, very simple ones at grade 1 level. And then the final level is those who can read stories fluently, and those stories are 8 or 10 lines, connected sentences, which we think are at grade 2 level. And so if you look at what we have here for India, ASER has a very large sample, 600,000 children. We see this picture, and let me describe the picture to you. So if I take the row, which is 3rd grade, and start at the far right end, you see that 27% children are at grade level, can read a story, or maybe can read higher. We don't measure it going any higher than story, so we don't know how much higher they can read. But let's say that 27% are at grade level. Where are the other kids? We see another 17% who are at grade 1 level, who are able to read paragraphs. And once you can read paragraphs, I think the journey to being able to read a story is quite fast. What about the others? We see 20% or almost 21% who can read words but cannot as yet deal with sentences. We see another 23% who can read letters but cannot put them together in words. And we see a 12% who are struggling even to recognize letters. So if I put the para and the story children aside, I see that I have more than 50% children in 5th grade who are more than 2 years behind where we expect them to be, more than 3 years, in fact, because they are not even at grade 1 level as yet. And we are talking about children who are in grade 3. So, and the same pattern works for grades 4 and 5. And so, if you had to characterize the global learning crisis or the learning crisis that we see in India, we see 3 features. One is that the learning levels right now are very low. 27% of children at grade level at grade 3 means that we already have 70% who have not reached up to grade level. And as I described, there are many well below grade level. The second is, and again, we've already seen that there is wide variation in children in the same grade. And the third is, if you look at, let us say, story level children, grade 3, grade 4, and grade 5, we find that even in grade 5, it's only 50% children who can read. So this growth over time is quite flat. And that's why we say that learning trajectories are flat. But coming back to my teacher and my school, the challenge that the primary school teacher faces in India and in countries like India is, given this picture, who should she teach? Should she teach the children who are at grade level, because she has grade level textbooks and grade level expectations, and the system is expecting her to complete the syllabus by the end of the year? Or should she focus on children who are more than 3 years behind and are yet struggling with even recognizing letters? So I would say that as I look at our learning situation, I feel that this is the biggest challenge that most primary school teachers face, at least in the government school system. A quick look at what about variations across the whole country. Here we see that India is a very big country, and we have a very wide set of variations. These are states. We've ranked some states, and here the data is from arithmetic. This is grade level. The actual item is, can children do subtraction, 2-digit minus 2 digits, but using borrowing? And we see that we have a huge variation across the country. And yet, as you know, and as in many other countries, the grade level expectations are the same, and often the textbooks are packed to the same level. So in all the subjects that the teacher has to teach, she faces the same problem about how does she deal with this wide variation, and how does she deal with low learning levels to begin with. So broadly, this is how we characterize the problem. Now let's go to seeing what kind of solutions we can come up with. Having gone through our understanding and analysis of the problem, let's look at how we can tackle it and what kind of solution can be used. So now imagine, let's leave the whole landscape of the country and so on aside, and let's look at one classroom or at one school. Now this is a school, average typical school in India, primary school. We have grades 3, grades 4, grades 5, and we have anywhere between 20 and 30 children in each grade. And as we have seen before, a typical school is organized by age and grade. So each grade has children of a certain age, and as you get older, you have higher grades. And so this is what we can describe a school with 3 grades, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades, and each of them are in a row. Total of about 82 children, and let's say there are 3 teachers in this school. So what shall we do here? Now, a typical school, as we said, is organized by rows, and one teacher teaches each grade. Grades remain same for the whole school year, and children move from one grade to the next at the end of the school year. And she usually teaches from a grade level textbook, but as we've already discussed, she struggles with all the children who are not at grade level and what to do with them. Teaching at the right level uses the same set of resources, the same people, the children are the same, the teachers are the same. The big difference is, rather than organizing my instructional time by rows, for some time during the day, I can regroup these children by columns. And I have shown here, for this particular school, if I had to reorganize the school, and let's say I do it for 2 hours a day, 1 hour for reading and 1 hour for math, I would put the beginner and the letter children together, about 28 children, across grades. Look at how there are beginner and letter children in grade 3, grade 4, and grade 5. So I group them together, and I have a group which is about 28 children. I take the word level children, and I find that if I group them across grades, I have about 22 children. And then the remainder, children who can read at grade 1 level or at grade 2 level, I group them together, and I have about 32 children. So 3 teachers earlier had anywhere between 20 and 30 children. And even in this regrouping, they roughly have similar numbers. This grouping will depend on how many instructors or teachers we have available and what is the composition of the children across these different groups. But as you can see, there is no extra resources here. It's the same teachers, same children, just going from rows to columns. Now, what will she do, or what will the teachers do when we have grouped like this? Remember, in business as usual, she teaches all the children from the grade level textbook, and children remain in that grade for the whole year. In teaching at the right level, it's different. The children are organized by their current learning level. And I stress current learning level because if you use this method, kids move very quickly to the next level and the next level. And so here they are organized by their level. One teacher teaches the groups as I've described, and the grouping can be done depending on the composition of how many teachers and children are available. She uses activities and materials appropriate for her group. So, for example, in the blue group, if the teacher has children who are still beginning to recognize letters, she plays a lot of letter games, she does a lot of oral activity, and she does activities which strengthens children's ability to recognize and connect sight and sound of different kinds of alphabets. And as you do these different activities, children move from one group to the other. And very often you have to regroup the children quickly so that the teachers can then be allocated evenly to different groups. So if I just outline what are the differences between what I would call business as usual and teaching at the right level in terms of classroom practices, or in fact in terms of school practices, these are the few things that I would highlight. The goal in my normal classroom is to complete the curriculum by the end of the school year and make sure that everybody has gone through that curriculum, usually the textbook. The goal of the teaching at the right level class is to ensure that the child has basic foundational skills, very clearly articulated goals for both reading and math. And as you saw, if I even use a simple reading tool, it would be how many children can reach the story level or the para level by the time I finish the program or the intervention. These interventions can last anywhere between 2 months to a bit longer, but we certainly feel that in about 100 days, a lot can be accomplished. Now, assessments in a regular class, in business as usual, as we call it, tends to be pen and paper and tends to be aligned with the curriculum. It's hard for the teacher to use these results immediately. And usually assessments are used as two bookends, beginning of the term or beginning of the year and end of the term or end of the year. In teaching at the right level, the assessment is very simple, as you saw, and it can be used very quickly by the teacher and the school immediately to group, to understand the children, to group them, and then to track progress. And so the assessment is directly aligned and useful for guiding ongoing instruction. In a normal teaching at the right level class, children are organized by age and they sit in a particular grade, as we said, for the whole year. In teaching at the right level, the children are grouped by the level at which they are right now. And then as they make progress, they jump from one group to the next. And very soon, by the end of the intervention, there's nobody left in the beginner or the letter level groups, sometimes not even in word. And the entire class is bunched at the higher level, which is at the para or the story level. In a regular classroom, business as usual, of course, there are many good teachers, but the typical practice that you see is that children face the teacher does activities, whole class activities, often doing a lot of writing on the board that the children copy down. And much of the instruction is based at grade level, which means it is directed to what we would call top of the class, or the children who sit right in the front rows. In teaching at the right level, the teaching starts at the level of the child. And there is a lot of group activity, whole group, small group, simple, engaging tasks that are done constantly, but which vary as the children get into higher groups. Now, if you think about the system which is going to support this kind of classroom practice, and remember, in teaching at the right level, the core activity is happening in the classroom, and everything else has to support that core activity. Because it is that core activity, the interaction between children and teachers, that's going to change. And therefore, the system needs to be aligned to support and enable that change to happen. So training of teachers, for example, in usual typical teacher training is done, at least in India, by resource persons or trainers who have not carried out the program themselves, but maybe have higher educational qualifications and come from a particular cadre within the training structure. In a typical teaching at the right level program, we insist that training should only be done by those leaders of practice who have actually done this themselves. So, very often, as we get a system ready for implementing teaching at the right level, we will request the system, the government, to give us a set of people who are the level above the school, the level above the teachers. In India, this tends to be a category called cluster coordinators or block resource people, whose job it is to actually visit schools and provide on site support. And so we feel it is that person really who has to be equipped to know what to do with children, to know how these different groups function. And the best way to know that, in addition to, of course, having some training, is to actually implement a teaching at the right level class for at least 2 to 3 weeks before they can become trainers and helpers of other people. And hence, we like the name leaders of practice rather than trainers, because the word leaders of practice indicates that I have to lead you while you do your practice, and therefore I can't do that unless I've done it myself. And this is a big, I think, a big key feature of why teaching at the right level works well, because it is supported by people who have done exactly what you're doing, but they've done it before and they've seen demonstrated results. Leaders of practice will do a practice class in their own schools or in some school daily for a period of 3 weeks at least, because we know from our past experience that if you do teaching at the right level methods correctly, children can move up one level almost every week. So as a trainer, as a leader, when I come back to tell my teachers, I should be able to actually give them first-hand experience and first-hand inputs about how the children that the leader taught changed over the course of these 3 weeks. And so this ongoing field-based support and academic support is absolutely critical. In a typical class, often this is not built into the training program, and school visits are done for inspection or for monitoring. In the teaching at the right level systems, we have the same people who train the teacher visit schools over and over again, and also maybe align their visits to the teachers or the schools that need their help the most. So if the baseline results are low, you may get much more help because you are a school which requires extra attention to help you pull up and move with the mainstream. Monitoring and review in a business as usual case, pen and paper assessment done beginning or end of a learning unit, not much data analysis done during the course of the program or the course of the teaching to help the teachers move to the next stage. And program reviews are done perhaps with long intervals. Teaching at the right level, simple assessment used quite frequently, helps to move children to the next level, helps to identify who's not making progress, helps in asking for help, and then the data is used at the system level or at the block, at the level above the school to be able to decide who needs help and how much help and when. So a quick decision-making loop to inform how things should proceed. And I would say that this whole process is actually designed, and the underlying philosophy is that you have a large number of children in school. So let's say you're moving quite rapidly towards the goal of schooling for all, but teaching at the right level helps you, even under your current circumstances, gear your learning such that you're able to really aim for learning for all. This is just a summary of what happens. You do the assessment, you group the children by level, you allocate your existing instructors or teachers to each of these, you teach them appropriate activities, you use appropriate activities for each group, you use materials, then they move into different groups, and you use this cycle till you find almost all children are able to either read paragraphs or stories. What kind of change can you see? This is some data from a few years ago. It is about 100,000 children in over 3,000 schools. And if you look at the greens, which are the readers, the light green are the children who can read at para level, dark green at story level. You can see in the baseline, very much like our India picture, large number of children not yet reading para or story. And in a period of about 50 days of instruction, you can see that the green dominates, and therefore, very large number of children have learned to read. And I think that, in most places where teaching at the right level has been done effectively, you will see this big change between, every couple of weeks. So that by the end of this period, in this case, it's 50 days, you have a large number of children who are able to actually read, comprehend, ask questions, makes life so much easier for the teacher, because slowly after this stage, she can move into doing what she was doing with her grade level textbooks. So I want to tell you a quick a case study, and we are, I would say, still in the pandemic. We don't know how long this period will last. Different parts of the world have had schools shut for long periods of time, and we are coming back. And big concern everywhere is, where is our children's learning journeys headed? How far behind are we from what was business as usual, and what can be done? And so I want to share some data with you from one of India's biggest states, Uttar Pradesh, otherwise called UP, and look at what happens in a typical year versus when you have implemented teaching at the right level in a focused way. Now, there are lots of numbers on this sheet. I don't want to submerge you, but just look at the first table, table A, which has a number of different years, 2012 till 2018. For India, for full states, we have data for where children were. The word STD is actually standard, which is another word in India used for grade. And you can see the proportion of children, the cells are numbers, which is the proportion of children who are reading at grade 2 level, at standard 2 level, and how each cohort moves over time. Asar is a repeated cross section, but it's a very large repeated cross section. And we use that data often to follow cohort movement across years. And that's what the colors are. You'll see diagonals moving through the chart and numbers which indicate percentage of children who can read at story level. And the kind of story is given to you here in Hindi on the right side. So if I summarize in table 2, and again, the story differs a bit from cohort to cohort, from year to year, and from grade to grade. But by and large, in the primary grades, grades 2, 3, 4, 5, over the last few years, we see that in a typical pre-COVID year, in this state, there is a 5 to 10 percentage point increase. And this is exactly what we mean by when we say the learning trajectories are flat, that you spend a whole year in school, but the percentage improvement in your ability to read basic text could be anywhere between 5 and 10%, slightly higher gains for the older grades. Now, how do we compare this kind of a gain in a typical year with what is possible when you do teaching at the right level? And in 2018-19, the state government partnered with Pratham, and about, for a period of about, I forget now, but it's something like 30, 40, I think about 50, I know it's a little bit more, 50 to 60 days, this teaching at the right level program ran. And it was run in all over 120,000 government primary schools in the state. And so remember, we saw 5 to 15 percentage points annual improvement from our previous slide. Now, when this teaching at the right level program began, it ran from January to April. And on the right-hand side, you can see what the baselines were in grade 3 and grade 4 for percentage of children who could read at grade 3 level, and see where that has jumped up by April. So you see a much bigger improvement within a period of about 60, 70 days. You see that the improvement is anywhere between 14 to 17 percentage points, which means that what you're able to achieve in a typical year in 3 months or 2 months, when there's a focused program with teaching at the right level, you're able to achieve that. And therefore, if you extended the teaching at the right level program in UP for another 3 months, you would see much higher increases in children's ability to read. And so as we come off the pandemic last 2 years and we think about what we need to do, situation with children's basic learning was not great in most countries of Asia and sub-Saharan Africa, even before COVID. And with the time that schools have been closed and families and economies have been disrupted, the chances are is the situation has worsened. We feel very strongly that in bringing energy back to schools, to children, to teachers, to parents, and thereby to the whole system, programs or interventions like teaching at the right level, which really bring the bottom up and provide really positive energy for really moving forward on this learning journey. So I hope that this talk has helped, and I hope that many of you who are listening will be encouraged to try similar things in your own context. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and we have here are the contacts if you want to know more.